All right, here we go again. So I've done a little bit more work. I've sort of started working on basically these sort of sections, just detailing this out. I didn't get all of the lines finished. So yeah, probably in this session, just do a chilled out inking, doing finished lines, yeah, session, and that'll be good. And probably what I'll do is, after that, yeah, I'll have a go at sort of finishing a lot of these things off, and maybe we'll do one last one once I've sort of got the, all of the flat colors in there and stuff, and we can sort of talk about how to finish it off. But yeah, I mean, what I want to talk about today is the idea of the patience that you sort of need for this, because I feel like, again, these things do take time, and it's not always the best subject for a sort of stream. It's not sort of non-stop mayhem and hilarity, but this is often what working on these things is actually like. So I think it's important to talk about and just sort of show that sort of process. Yeah, I mean, normally I don't do images that are this elaborate for the other stuff I do in YouTube. I do sort of the real-time stuff because I think that's important, but normally I'm making sure I can kind of finish it, in 2 hours or something. And here, yeah, you're just sort of seeing the difference in time when you add that extra detail and have to sort of think about and make sure that we're getting all of the detail in there, and it sort of just ups the requirement in general for everything. Like everything sort of takes a jump, because once you've sort of spent so much time on the previous step, you then kind of sort of, it's almost like you have sort of loss aversion to kind of rushing the end of it. So yeah, you sort of in for a penny, in for a pound, right? Once we sort of start working on this and putting more detail in, then the rest of it sort of cascades. Hopefully in this case we'll be able to get away with just some sort of flat color and yeah, see how that goes. So again, might not double up on that sort of time, but yeah, in general, it's just a matter of chilling out and doing a lot of this basic work, right? So yeah, let me know how everyone's going, who we have in the stream chat, what you people are up to. Because yeah, I'm just going to be drawing leaves for a while. So yeah, just trying to put a little bit of sort of texture into these planes. To a certain degree, it kind of just helps to show what direction they're going. It makes it clear that like there is something there. If we just kind of leave it all flat, then it can look a little bit flat in the in the finish. The lines kind of tell us where different stuff is going. Yeah, so again, that's this side done over here. And what we got to do is sort of replicate that on the other side. And then this stuff will be behind. as I was saying before, though, figuring out what's going to overlap what with the lion is going to be tricky. That's something we do have to think about. But yeah, in many cases, all this kind of extra fussing, as I was saying last week, will be useful, and we'll be very, very glad we did it when we come to color. If we kind of skip this too much, then the color phase can kind of become a little bit more hair-raising, because, you know, sometimes stuff just sort of doesn't work. And, you know, you kind of have some of these little areas that sort of feel okay when they're sketchy at the sketch phase, but, you know, if we don't really dive in there and figure out what those things are, then yeah, it just kind of looks bad. All right. So we got this over here, and what I'll do is I'll have to figure out what's happening here a little bit later. So what I'll do here is just try and figure out what I do know. If you're faced with some sort of problem, some challenge, the best thing to do is just keep moving. Figure out what we do know, right? I know that these are going to be here. I'm not sure exactly what's overlapping what. And again, I'm trying to be a little bit more deliberate with these strokes, trying not to sort of get too sketchy with it. Whereas normally I'd sort of just be, you know, sort of going a bit like this, and, you know, that would probably turn out okay. Whereas here, I have a feeling we'll be sort of looking at these, and they'll be sort of pretty big in the final application. So again, can be good to just rotate, get a different angle on it. Sort of finding that I'm still looking up at a separate monitor there. But yeah, rotating, I was finding it sort of can be tricky to get some of those marks previously. Right. Sometimes, again, we have a natural kind of inclination to move sort of with the body when we're drawing. If we rotate the canvas, it kind of gives us some extra flexibility. It can go a little bit quicker. All right. And again, playing around with just putting a bit of texture here and there. You do have to think about what is going to overlap what when we do this, though. Like what layer is going to be where. And again, I have to pay close attention to the specific way we blend these things when we do the color, because we'll have sort of separate layers. So again, it doesn't look as interesting when you're viewing it from that angle. But obviously I can check what this looks like when it's all straightened out. And again, I feel like a lot of this will be in shadow, so don't really need it that much. Most of the focus is going to be on those sort of characters over there. So there is a minimum amount of work we need to do. But I think we're kind of out of the woods a little bit when we start to get over here, although this here will be like quite a strong little silhouette over here. But again, so doing these kind of like little marks, right, where we're kind of just sort of adding these patterns is, again, it's a very sort of simple picture making technique that we're going for there. It's basically using pattern as texture. You can think of it as that sort of pointillism. I remember when I was in high school, I had to in art class, I feel like they always get you to do like cross hatching and pointillism. It just seemed like completely sort of banal and pointless. Yeah, but that's what this is. Yeah, I just don't think I ever really used it in the same way that I got taught it in art class. Like, again, it's just another one of those easy, lazy exercises to give people. Kind of everyone can do it. And I'm remembering again that, with that, there was that previous image I was showing. If I can get it up again, that had a lot of like heavy foliage detail. And yeah, let's see if I can find it. I think it's like super big, so we'll see if it like completely destroys the computer. But yeah, so I'm sort of trying to avoid that, thinking about strategies for how to sort of optimize showing this sense of sort of overgrown foliage without kind of it getting too busy. And I think a lot of that is kind of just working with pattern. Right here, there was like a little bit too much sort of changing of direction. And again, like there's a few too many little bits where I've kind of gone in here and tried to make it too interesting. So it's like it's hard. The hierarchy of detail is a little bit sort of harder to read, whereas I think it's a little bit easier to relax the eye if well, this is my theory at least. Hopefully it'll be a little bit easier to relax the eye if we just kind of keep some of these things simple and just think more about the pattern side of it. So again, you can use the same theory and concept if you're painting something. It's obviously this is not a concept that only applies to a line and color process and style. The thing there is to think more about, again, just the frequency of brush strokes, how you're using maybe bigger brushes to give you more of a suggestive look. So again, it's a way of sort of suggesting detail, and these are all techniques that you build by observing the real world, thinking about how you are going to represent that in your image, and then kind of again just building hand-eye coordination, muscle memory for doing that. And again, that really depends exactly how how much detail you need to put in, how much how much time and effort you've got. And it's something you build, but you can also just look at how other people have done it. You can look at other people's big scenes and see how did they handle that same level of detail. Like what were they doing differently. So here's a few sort of quick tips for inking and getting line work in Photoshop. Now, there's a lot of lines here to work with, and I've roughed them out in a fairly loose way that it's not very good. This underdrawing isn't very good. Now, what we can do is we can use Photoshop's ability here to basically, create layers and replicate things to figure out how to solve these problems and get a clean result. So it's a matter of sort of looking at what are the elements here that really sort of need replication, right? So because I've done that rough sketch, but I'm not necessarily convinced that that's going to work. So I'm sort of making a shape, and this is obviously representing the sort of bottom edge of that tile. Excuse me. Let's sort of go J, and now what I'm gonna do is kind of, again, there's heaps of wriggle room here. I think, yeah, I really need to probably just rotate that around. Right, we gotta get this kind of going in the right direction here. And the idea is these tiles kind of hook under each other. And I find it's actually like a bit of a huge pain to figure out on the fly. So here we go. This is sort of the basic idea. Total Photoshop hackery. So I've got a couple of layers. Let's merge those down. Got those there. And again, probably just sort of erase a little bit. Just clean that up. And from here, it's actually now a lot easier to sort of join them up. Now, again, there's degrees that we could go to here in terms of fussing around with this. Trying to get them overlapping in a reasonable, realistic way. I'm gonna try and I didn't really do a great job of that on the previous one. But again, what I'm doing is using Photoshop's sort of natural ability to replicate, use layers to solve a lot of these problems here. And this one will sort of be Again, back here. Now, I don't have to go crazy with this because I know I'm going to hack it up. And so if I make it too technical, it's really going to stand out. So again, here we too can suggest things a little bit. Let's see. What's going on? So again, it's pretty rough, right? Like if you're looking up, if you're doing it, and this is often the thing with finished line work in Photoshop, if you're doing it, it's going to feel a lot more rough. The trick is to sort of know, well, how much can you get away with, right? Like when we zoom out and look at the bigger picture, what's actually going to matter? And I think the things that will matter are going to tend to be the overall proportion. So the secondary form of these, you know, does it feel like they're all going in the right direction? Do they kind of match? You know, is the distance here okay? As long as those things are sort of half decent, I think in many cases you'll be okay. So again, easier to rotate. Draw some of these leaves that are sort of falling down, just using the natural flow of my sort of hand. So again, I'm not really sure what's happening over here, but that is the silhouette. So prioritize, again, as I always say, prioritize the external silhouettes. And again, we can kind of imagine maybe there is some sort of bar or something under there. It doesn't really make sense that that would still be alive if it was sort of wood. But anyway, so adding some cracks, making them feel unique. So again, just checking the look of this. And here again, right? We can take a line like this and, right, duplicate. Again, that's not perfect. Once you've sort of got the general replication though, you know, we can sort of erase, right? We can make it a little bit more interesting. Got this coming down. And again, one of the things, one of the iconographies of stuff that is sort of a bit broken is that where you sort of have things joining each other, we're more likely to have sort of little weeds and stuff growing, you know, so maybe there's sort of less likely to be weeds here, but, you know, dirt and stuff is sort of going to gather in the crevices where, you know, these things join, and that's typically where you're going to see a lot of those kind of like bigger sort of weeds and other kind of foliage bits and pieces. And also it's an interesting sort of silhouette, right? So it sort of solves a few problems at the same time. The trick here is basically to go as fast as we can without making it look rough or sketchy. So here we've got a similar thing. Now I'm not going to draw it over here because it'll allow, if I do it over here, can have a go at putting this in. I'm going to rotate, because again, I'm finding that the pen is kind of not giving me the right thickness under there. All right, we've got this. So that's sort of what I've got there. Probably make it tuck in. All right, tuck in, lasso. All right, 1, 2, and then obviously we add this thing here. And that's really, that's sort of how it's done, or at least that's how I do it. So yeah, doing the technical drawing side of it, we leverage the technical drawing implements in Photoshop, which in many cases is, as opposed to trying to physically make the same line again, if we make it in the right order, it's very easy to just kind of select, duplicate, and away you go. Now, you could just, do a better underdrawing potentially, and, not have to deal with that. I feel like this needs to come down a little bit. But again, these are the ways I would, normally try and save a bit of time. And again, I'm leveraging what Photoshop's good at, and I'm sort of ignoring what it's not good at. And again, I have these foliage things I can use also to just sort of cover areas where I'm not really sure what's going on, or we've got some sort of bad transitions. Often the trickiest things to draw are always the transitions, right? That's where you sort of tend to notice if things aren't going well. And also, the more you do these things, the easier they get. Like the more that you draw this type of subject matter, the easier it's going to be, because you get a feel for what you're going to have to do next. So having to pause and stop and think. So the second time I'm doing this, it's a little bit easier. It would be good to see the, again, I don't have a camera on this. Don't have a camera on this machine, unfortunately. But obviously this kind of thing is probably more entertaining to watch if you can actually see the physical sort of hand side of it. Because yeah, otherwise it's kind of just like in Photoshop, it's just kind of like magically lines appearing. Whereas obviously the trick of this is kind of how you control the pen, where you move it, etc. Yeah, and I'm not sure like how much sort of shadowing or stuff like that I should put on. Again, that's probably something that I'll find out. I'm experimenting with that. We'll find out what that looks like. Like whether or not this looks good here, or whether I should sort of leave it like that. I think that side of it can be quite challenging to figure out. Here again, I have a pretty rough underdrawing. And yeah, I do feel like doing this type of work, it is important to stay a little bit loose. I've made the mistake a couple of times of being, of just getting that sort of feeling wrong, and kind of having this, series of really sort of static looking leaves and things that kind of just don't feel as sort of natural. So I feel like, again, a lot of those things are about, we either need to kind of do it properly or really suggest. Again, suggestion is often, what we're sort of trying to achieve. All right, again, try and tell the story of the shape here by making some of these little cracks and things go around the form. And again, part of that is me visualizing that form. I constructed it, so hopefully I've got a bit of an idea how it should go. There we go. So again, I feel like this, got some shapes here. Just anything we can sort of do to make it feel a little bit more wild. Right, again, maybe some sort of sticks or things growing out the top that just don't look very manicured. Anyway, so yeah, similar thing here. There's not that many. We get away with just making that pretty basic. Something like that. So again, the more we can kind of think about creating, again, marks that trace the form of these tiles or whatever they are, the better. Right? Again, tell the story of the form. And if we need to, again, just make sure we're, pushing a few darks here and there, making it feel a little bit more nuanced. And one of the things we could do is, again, just sort of go through, close all these lines, really sort of double check and work on these silhouettes. That's the kind of thing that is probably worth doing at this stage for some of these lines, because we don't want to be chasing these around all the time. It will be very boring. Oh yeah, we had this thing. Another one of these plants. Yeah, so again, I feel like that's kind of sorted. Now we just got to sort of fill in all this stuff. But again, as I keep saying, if we prioritize the silhouettes that we're likely to see, then it's a lot easier to figure out what we should pay attention to. Again, some busted up old bits of wood stuff from the gate that used to live here. Just moving around the image. Not a lot of rhyme or reason to it. So yeah, any questions about inking or getting finished lines, how to sort of deal with that side of it, let me know, because it's very easy for me to demonstrate those ideas here because, you know, just sort of working through it. And, you know, I'll often try different, you know, approaches, try to be a little bit looser here, a little bit looser there, remember sort of what I was doing. And then, you know, at the finished line phase, you know, I'll compare some different approaches, right? So this, for instance, here is like, you know, this is a little bit sketchier than the way I did it over here. Sort of see which one feels better. And here we've got that same thing here. So again, you'll get the best result if you actually just go and, you know, draw this properly and then ink it properly. But these little tricks do help stuff go a lot faster. Let's put a little sort of broken indent here. This line. So again, as we move towards the periphery of the image, going to be a little bit looser. You know, I don't want, if we do crop in, I don't want anything that's really going to sort of stick out if it gets cut. You know, probably this is, you know, a little bit, you know, that's probably a little bit much, in fact, you know, if we just kind of blend it out a little bit better. That'll crop better if we need it to. Again, that's like a really sort of subtle point, but I think sometimes those things are important. Again, putting some very, very abstract tone there to push that. And I'm going to break up these lines because, again, you know, these are not really outlines. They're kind of internal lines that are describing to us what's happening with the form. And again, I don't want them to feel, you know, like sort of razor thin or anything. Okay. Just working through this. Let me pause Dropbox. I think Dropbox is chugging the internet connection a bit. Hopefully that streams a bit better now. So again, things like this, right? We've just sort of got some sort of grass here. Again, to a large degree, it's just going to sort of read as noise. So it's going to feel like there's texture on top of the flat color, which when we've got flat color, I think is something we really need to work on and work towards. And again, just putting some lines in here to make this feel less flat, because we want it to feel as if it's been hacked up a bit. Again, putting some shadows under here, seeing whether that helps things. And again, I'm kind of loose with the way I put those things in. Again, I don't know whether that will turn out, right? This shadow, like it feels like maybe like, as opposed to sort of showing detail under there, like a better way of doing it might be to kind of just sort of draw the cast shadow where I think it will be. And then just sort of make it one flat shape. Again, not that there's going to be heaps of a cast shadow either logically. None of this is logical, right? It's not logical shadows. It's mainly just sort of for interest. And again, how can we help differentiate little bits and pieces? Okay. So maybe there's like a tile here that's like sort of broken off a few bits and pieces. Again, just make that look a little bit more like there's something going on. But yeah, so if you can't kind of work your way through an image like this and break it down, right? Because here's where we are. Then, it is very tricky to kind of get to that next level of detail with your own work. A lot of it is, just sort of sitting around, chilling out, working on these types of images, working on these types of problems. And that's often, it's not easy to do any of those because we're making decisions. And so, you have to practice these things and learn how you add detail. But it's really important to understand that, that's often where the money is, right? Is in sort of making it finished and polished. So it's really well worth, developing your ability to have the patience to work through these things. And to not get, potentially intimidated by, that level of complexity. Cool. Yeah, anyway, I feel like that's, that's working okay. And it does require you to think a lot about like what's going to be there, what is over here. And to try and tell these little stories, right? Like keep telling little stories, tiny little bits and pieces here and there. Right. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much what we need to do. I feel like here, oh, what's happening? Yeah, for some reason on this machine, whenever I like tab out and go to a different like application or screen, it turns the tilt sensitivity on the pen off. I find just hitting a Windows key and then entering back into Photoshop sort of fixes that. Okay, it's probably a sign you just need to reinstall everything, hey? So again, a lot of what these little sort of textural things say is like this area is the same to this area because it's got the same pattern. You know, you can also sort of draw something that goes behind a foreground element, and that will kind of help show the depth. But also just sort of describing that, pattern side of it will do very much the same thing. So again, just working on texture. If you're developing your own style, one of the things you can do is you can sort of work on the initial line work here, and then on a separate layer, you can add these sort of little, again, pattern textural marks or other things like, playing around with the shadows, or saying like, well, should those shadows be darker, like, should I make this sort of darker over here? Again, you can play with those and sort of turn them on or off at the end, and that'll kind of give you a good idea about whether or not you actually want to, once the color's in there and it's all finished, whether or not that's actually making it better. But certainly one of the things that does, just need to rotate around so it's easy for me to get. See, when I'm sort of going right to left, I'm getting, because of the pen, if you sort of zoom up, you're looking at the pen rotation, I'm getting like a thin line, whereas sometimes I want a thick line. So I'm sort of choosing to rotate the canvas around so I can just quickly get a few really quick lines like that. But so one of the things that adding little textural bits to the surface does is, again, it sort of creates pattern. So for instance, there's no dots here on these leaves, but there are dots here. And what it does is it often reduces our need to kind of draw stuff in there, because we can, then sort of tell, oh, that's like the same material, it's the same, right? It's the same thing, right? So again, the tiles have texture a little bit more like this, whereas the rock maybe has some sort of dot texture. And the grass kind of has this sort of uniform pattern a little bit more. So again, these are all very subtle things. They're very subtly different, but the grass is more uniform, right? So it's these little kind of mix of three little dots, right? So sort of 1, 2, 3, right? It's sort of a more defined pattern. Whereas, where are we here? What else is on this layer? Which? Oh yeah, okay. So that's meant to be there. Yeah, okay. So let's merge. I'm just going to double, triple check that's all on the right layer. Just because this is where you cause massive pain if you mess this up. This is like total bedlam if this gets messed up. All right. So again, here, these dots are a little bit more sort of random. These are longer. longer. Whereas, yeah, these ones can be just sort of randomly placed around. And we'll see. I mean, I might really regret just doing all this because I'm sort of, I don't often normally do too much of this kind of thing. But yeah, whereas these are a bit more uniform, right? So groupings. And again, maybe this could have dots that's similar. Anyway, so that's the general idea there. Now, again, not sure I'm going to put something there. I feel like I'm eyeing off that composition. Now, I mean, here's an interesting point is that these are going to be on the layer above, but a lot of this texture here, right? Like a lot of this stuff might actually, even some of this stuff down here might actually be on this layer. Again, that'll make sense when we sort of do it, but it can be good to kind of have some stuff there. Again, if that doesn't end up happening, it won't be there, so it'll be fine. So yeah, and in a similar way, we could put, so that we're on this layer, if we put a similar kind of set of things, okay, we'll see what this looks like. It'll only take us a couple of hours to go and erase all these if we need to. All right. Actually, I think that's wrong. That needs to be on the one underneath it. Yeah. All right, that's probably enough dots. So now we can play around with got the characters, and now we got foreground 1 layer, which is basically the archway. Although we do need to figure out, again, what's going to be overlapping the characters here. Now, again, there's a large range of, sort of tricks, I guess, we can use. One of them is just to kind of think of where the lion is kind of hitting. All right, we're just going to sort of have what I call like a patch. So when you're dealing with layers and things overlapping each other, often it's really useful to have just bits that are overlapping that just happen to be, in the right spot. Again, if we do it right, it'll appear pretty natural. If we do it wrong, it'll look really, really stupid. But again, now we got foreground 1. And so foreground 1 is basically everything else that's in the foreground. If we look at all of this stuff. And I think here I'm still on a 9, whereas I did this with an 8. So I'm going to go down to an 8. And definitely this image, I mean, I said this in previous weeks, but yeah, this image isn't going to look that good on, you know, just a standard kind of monitor. It's going to need to be printed big, right? It's, you know, hopefully it'll turn out if it's actually printed really huge. I think that's where it's going to have to shine. So here again, we've already put in a lot of this work, and this is where it can be tricky, right? Like, you know, sometimes adding this stuff, you know, ruins, you know, because I'm tracing it so much and I'm trying to sort of redo what I had and not, you know, like pretend that I didn't waste time doing this. Can sort of, yeah, not quite have the level of spontaneity you might want, but it's all right. So again, this is like an internal form line. So, you know, I'm going to try and avoid, you know, drawing it in a real clumsy way. Obviously, the, you know, we need to figure out where it's going to go. So we need to kind of draw it as the part of the underdrawing, but as part of the final drawing, we definitely don't need to. So I'm going to rotate this. And I guess this is where you can have different approaches based on your personality. You could either, you know, just do sort of what I'm doing, which is sort of just work your way through it and bounce around, not really having any, you know, rhyme or reason. You know, you could sort of do all of the major lines first. You could, you know, do all of the cracks first. You could do sort of whatever you want. But yes, certainly, you know, that there's many kind of systemized ways of doing it. And again, that's a big part of this kind of thinking about yourself. Do you prefer, you know, more logical step by step? Do you want to sort of bounce around? Do you get bored, you know, with one thing? How do you want to do it? There's no real right or wrong way. I often say this, that, you know, if you're studying kind of inking, they often have lots of recommendations for, you know, what you should do and shouldn't do. I think in many cases, if you're inking your own work, you know, if you're making the finished lines based on your own work, there really is no rules. It's just a separate drawing. When you're inking someone else's art, there's a lot of things you got to take into consideration. There's a lot of processes. There's a lot of, you know, you kind of got to make sure you're matching the drawing that's there. So, you know, and not sort of getting carried away or adding detail at the wrong time. So I think in that case, it does make a lot of sense to kind of go through it in a systematic fashion. Because that avoids kind of just, you know, zooming up and sort of noodling away, and then, you know, maybe getting too much of your sort of self in the image. So again, you know, it can be easier to sort of zoom up and, you know, hit these with a real sort of big strokes. That certainly will give us sort of nicer work. It doesn't necessarily look that good on a demo thing because you sort of can't see the whole image. But that will, you know, probably give a much more, you know, if we sort of zoom out, right, those might have a little bit more energy. And again, you know, so something you could do is, you know, sort of zoom up and you know, do all of these. these kind of foliage things. Just optimize for being able to use your sort of shoulder on the page a little bit more. It's good from a sort of RSI standpoint, not getting locked into, hyperstatic wrist movements and things. And again, you can kind of see that, the lines turn out pretty, like pretty sort of loose, but they have a nice sort of quality to them. Yeah, whereas if we sort of do it with our fingers, can work, but more likely to get little wobbles and things like that in there. And again, that is the sort of advantage of doing more work up front, is, you can sort of zoom in and not really care or know whether the finished lines are, hitting the right mark. If you're making it up a lot more as you go along, then you can't zoom up this much, right? Because these lines I'm making here don't really make any sense. They're very sort of abstract marks, but I can sort of see on the other screen, what they're doing, and I have an idea in my head. So yeah, totally up to you. Lots of experimentation. And that's what this kind of phase is for, right? It's for chilling out, hanging out, trying different things, being a little bit more playful with the line. And hopefully if you've done a good job with that construction phase, the thing is that, this phase can be 100% thinking about, as I was talking about, the textures, the subtle patterns, making sure you get exactly the right sort of line quality. If you're worrying too much about drawing at this phase, then that's where you're going to start to tighten up. So again, a lot of this stuff is not that important. It's right at the periphery. It's going to be high up on the image. Very unlikely people are going to see it. Down low, people are going to see it more. You've got to remember, again, if we're thinking of it as a mural, it's about 3 meters high. The majority of people are going to sort of be looking up at this, up here. It's going to be quite far away. And also, again, we want to make sure that, it's a bit loose so that if we crop into it, it's not the end of the world. So again, I'm glancing up every now and then, as I always am, to check what's happening, what this looks like on the bigger screen. And again, got to start moving a little bit quicker just to get this sort of thing done. So again, the idea here is we've still got some kind of moss and stuff. Not sure whether that should be, again, might be good to, again, zoom up a little bit, do this in a looser manner. Yeah, I don't feel like I need to do these big lines that loose. Could probably zoom out, but yeah, it might actually be quicker, to sort of zoom in and just sort of get that done. Again, but totally flying blind, right? We can't see what we're doing at all. And again, using that same technique, thinking about the texture here. Making sure that it's going to separate from the background. And also the way that you would do this, the way that you would, think about this kind of finished inking is going to vary depending on whether or not you're going to render it. You might not want to put that sort of texture in, right? This kind of pattern texture if you're going to, add a lot of rendering. That's why, again, you need to prototype it from a style point of view. Make sure that, it actually does make it look better. About suggesting a few shadows and things. And again, trying to think about where that texture is going to be. Right, and here we've got the wall kind of turning around away from us. And this is where, again, got to think about this kind of fading out. And that's where that texture is going to, texture is going to really help. Now, I don't know whether I wanted this to be like on this layer or not. I don't think so. Let's try just leaving it on here. It's probably going to be the easiest, honestly. But again, this is in the periphery. All right, so again, let's try zoom up. All right, see if we can get some of this foliage to work. Because again, I feel like the idea here was like, this is like a bit of a tree or something. So it's a slightly different look. Or maybe again, just like a bit like more of a creeper. Right. Sometimes it can be even better to zoom up, right? Because then, we're more likely to be just focusing on creating marks, right, and replicating, as opposed to accidentally sort of rendering form. Again, sometimes it's less about form than it is about sort of texture, material differentiation and stuff. So again, could be worth thinking about sort of shadows. I don't know. Again, I think my main goal is just to make sure that it still feels like we've got good material differentiation. So again, here you can see the difference in like the wobbliness, right, of these little lines versus like, if I zoom up and I'm just kind of like, oh yeah, let's draw some, right? These are going to feel a lot more spontaneous. Now I can get the same sort of effect, but I've got to put more focus in it to control that if I'm zoomed in. Sorry, if I'm zoomed out. If I'm zoomed in, the content is more abstract, but getting the pretty marks is a lot easier. And here again, I'm going pretty rough. Don't feel like we need to do anything special down here. Again, if you have some good areas of, solid texture and detail, then you find you can be a lot rougher elsewhere. Cool. Yeah, so again, just working through it. Let's sort of zoom out a little bit. So zoom. Yeah, so again, we're getting there. It's sort of slow going, or at least that's sort of how it feels to me. Again, I feel like I'm doing it really quite fast. But again, watching it as a demo is always pretty slow. But I find like it is actually better, like having you guys watch me do this is actually makes me go a lot faster. Whereas I feel like when I'm doing this type of work, I kind of need to watch a movie or something. I need to kind of have something to occupy my brain. Otherwise, I just get bored of it. You know what I mean? Like, so, having pressure, a time pressure, put on a timer and sort of say, oh, you got to get all this done in a particular time. I think that's a really good option. And likewise here, having people watching you, so you sort of got to, go through it, I think is a good option. Or just, occupying your mind a little bit. Like you got to get it right. Don't watch super exciting movies you've never seen before. Watch movies that you kind of like, but you've sort of seen before. So you can kind of just like chill out or listen to again, long form podcast audio content is can be really good. Yeah. I would strongly recommend against sort of short YouTube videos and stuff like that. If it's like 3 hours or, that's okay. But yeah, long forms, short stuff will just destroy productivity because you just keep changing stuff. So yeah, something that's like narrative based that you can just kind of chill out and sort of half listen to. You kind of know what people are talking about. Right, it's not dramatic, it's not dopamine driven, right? It's just relaxed. I think that's the sort of thing that you need to, if you're doing this, you're finding, you're sort of fading. That's the kind of best thing to do. But the good thing about doing this is that you sort of find that it can be pretty relaxing. It's quite a good sort of thing to do. Yeah, as opposed to, where are we going to go? I think we're sort of going to go like there. Yeah. So again, it's quite a nice, relaxing thing to do. I think I often have like a heart monitor watch on, because that's what I use when I'm running, and you can see like sometimes my heart rate like dips way down. Like whatever the average is, drops way down to resting. So I think it's like quite sort of relaxing to just like chill out and do this. But anyway, let's take a quick break. Again, just another sort of 5 or 10-minute break. Let me know if you've got any questions, because again, this will probably be the last sort of stream we have for this for a little bit. I'll sort of see how far I get, and then I'll sort of go through the next phase, and then maybe we'll do one last one in a couple of weeks or something. Once I've got the color phase up, and then we can sort of talk about the colors and all those sort of different choices, and again, look at how this stuff actually turns out. Because the real problem with line and color illustration is, when we're looking at it like this, it really is a flat image. There's not a lot going on, and so it's through the colors adding the foreground, middle ground, background that you really get a chance to make it into a proper illustration. At this point, it's kind of it's a plan for an illustration. But anyway, let's take a break. We'll come back in 5 or 10 and keep going. Cool. All right, we're back. So good to do this other side of this archway. Maybe just sort of join this up here somehow. And yeah, see if we can create some continuity here. Again, want to try and make sure this doesn't feel as if it's kind of just one straight line. And obviously, you know, back here, we've got smaller, you know, bits of grass. That's something that's going to help us. But yeah, trying to not get too sketchy with it. Again, good way to do that. Create some areas of sort of fixation, right? So like sort of features, and then if we sort of blend between them, that's a good way to, again, get that happening. And yeah, putting some sort of detached little tufts of grass here and there, because, you know, in my experience, that's something that just helps kind of fill the space and tell the story of depth without, you know, without giving an overwhelming feeling of detail. So again, filling up some of that space. And here we go. Got some of these super simplified creeper vine things. And coming out of it is more of these overlapping plant forms. Yeah, right. Just like, where am I? What's going on? So yeah, I've got some of these sort of plants here. And this is going to give us a nice sense of overlap. Boom. All right, so that's connected there. But you remember a lot of these bits weren't fully connected, right? Like this is pretty rough in the way that it was sort of blocked in. And again, I remember sort of being like, well, we'll be able to figure that out when we get to it. And here we are. So how do we make these into simple shapes? And again, anchor these bits and pieces. Yeah. So this is a plank. Like, what did you draw, Tim? What is going on? It's a plank, and here's the underside of it. So this is where it can be good to go through and just sort of rough everything in. All right, so we'll draw the outline of this, sort of anchor this there. the idea is, again, we want some of these bigger sort of creeper style, like these rounder leaves over here, so that we can kind of have them starting to, you know, crawl up. Crawl around the place. Goes there, maybe again, some sort of foliage or moss, something like that. And so up here. So it's really just connect the dots, right? Just figuring out what I drew. And this is where, again, I didn't do as much work over here as I did on the other side for the cracks and all those things. So, you know, that's stuff that we can make up as we go. Trying to not make them directional. These are like a bit, and even now I'm like, yeah, I feel like these are a bit directional. Probably better to try and make them rounder, because that makes it a bit easier. To kind of just have it as a random pattern. Although here again, one of the things you got to remember is, right, we're sort of looking at it from the side. All right, so we sort of got to tell the, right, got to make the ellipses kind of work. Bam. All right, enough of that. What are we doing down here? Again, getting sidetracked. Oh. Again, covering up those connections with some sort of pattern about having more of these little circular guys climbing around. Okay, maybe they're kind of like wrapping around here. So erase that. Wrapping around there. Around there. And again, this is quite important because these are, primary silhouettes that will be sort of visible. That's not the right pattern language there. We want a wood pattern language, which is so these overlapping forms. And again, we could explain and tell the story more of like this being part of the gate. But, again, in this instance, I'm just going to keep it super, super basic. We've got enough, big ideas in here without getting too carried away. All right, so I mean that's like got to connect all these dots. So again, we're sort of almost there. Now we can probably do the rest of this. So again, these ones are more directional. Going to check on the other monitor to see whether they feel like they're the same size as the ones on the other side. Yes, they are. All right. Again, same thing. Trying to fill in the same sort of space that we had from those previous sketchy blobs. All right. Now we just got to do a whole bunch of these kind of cracks again. So this is where, again, it's kind of like, same sort of thing. What I might do just quickly is sort of talk about how we would, handle doing some of the background, because again, that's just repeating the same thing. That is probably what I do. I really like to sort of finish it off, but, now we can see that, that silhouette is finished, and it's just a matter of sort of filling in detail there. If we test what it looks like, that's kind of what it looks like. So you can see again, I think that'll kind of work. Again, if we can kind of get this, it's the same over there. Might do another, tweak the characters. I'm not 100%. I think the eyes and some of those details might need another little bit of futzing with. Yeah, so that's foreground one. So what we need to do is make a few more layers, right? So here we've got background, sort of, let's do it the same way. One being furthest back, right? So that'll be this. And then we need another one there, which will be background 2. And that'll be this stuff. And then we need background 3, which I think could be this stuff. Then we need background 4, which would be like this stuff. Yeah, I mean, this was going to be on its own sort of terracey level thing. So that should be, so I think we actually need 5. Background 3. Background 4. So there's lots of layers there. And obviously we won't be drawing the little character or anything. But yeah, so what we're doing here is a different sort of level of detail, right? So we're doing a lot more suggestion. And again, this is another one of those, you find this on a different zoom level. This is another one of those things where, again, you have to experiment and play around and, see what sort of works for your style, see, what other techniques people have for doing, these types of suggested trees in the background. And, obviously look at real trees as well, because that will help. And again, it's a little bit silly because these trees probably would have become way overgrown by now, and not as sort of manicured. Yeah, not liking that. And the trick is just to think of like the primary form and secondary form as we're kind of, combining all of that in one. So, things we want to think about are, these large kind of masses of leaves and things overlapping. So again, don't see that kind of here. And we got this kind of really, again, it's a pretty basic tree, hey? Again, think about that sort of texture. And here, again, got a similar sort of thing. Now we could have these, trees on separate layers and, make that a little bit easier. I don't think we need that. We're going to have so much parallax in the background. I don't think that's going to be necessary. But yeah, just sort of showing like, that there's, scrub and sort of bushes build up here. Again, so similar idea with the texture, right? Except the texture here is just this type of mound, right? So it's not like this, right? It's not these little dots, although there are some of those, right? Same idea, just more. just a bit simpler. So I'm like sort of wondering whether I should maybe do like a similar thing here as I did to sort of link up that foreground and background. All right. So again, same sort of idea. So obviously different design, but same kind of concept as what we've got over there. To kind of frame the scale. So bring that over here. All right. Again, guesstimating that scale there. Putting it down. So these are like tiny, right? Like they're still going to be sort of big in, you know, when it's sort of printed, but yeah, relatively speaking, right? These are kind of quite small. And all you have to pay attention to is sort of how big the brush is, right? Like as we get smaller and smaller into the distance, your job is to suggest more. So, you know, I can't sit in there and sort of, you know, do little leaves and things because it's just going to appear too strange. So yeah, it's more a matter of just thinking about like, how do you represent, you know, overgrowth or little weeds, you know. Whoop, don't know what happened there. But yeah, I mean, obviously the idea here is that there's like, you know, there used to be a path, right? And maybe it's like, you know, I can sort of hint at that through drawing, you know, a bit of that here and there. But the idea is it's probably going to be overgrown like everything else. So yeah, just like, you know, making things feel like they're more kind of, there's just sort of foliage everywhere. Nothing's quite straight. You know, that sort of generally is the iconography of something that's sort of grown, like overgrown, is that everything's a bit soft, right? We don't see any of the cleanness, right? We don't see visually the, you know, the clean lines anymore. Everything's kind of just been consumed by the softness of the foliage and weeds and grass. And yeah, that's sort of how we'll be, you know, handling the background is, you know, as opposed to drawing little, you know, leaves everywhere, you know, we're thinking about pattern and what represents pattern when we're considering something from a particular scale, right? So, and again, important to, you know, zoom out, look at these. I'm looking at them on a separate monitor again, so I don't need to do that too much. There we go. So yeah, again, same sort of idea. And again, we've got these things that are in the foreground that are going to be overlapping, right? This sort of first layer of the background, and they're also overlapping that second layer of the background. And again, that stuff's so important. I keep saying it, but the reason I keep saying it is because it's so important. It makes everything a lot easier. All right. So yeah, that's pretty much it. Again, with this kind of stuff, there's no point fussing over it too much. What I'll do is like keep drawing the stuff in the background, and then once that's done, it'll be a lot easier to kind of go through and do it past where we sort of figure out that hierarchy of detail a little bit better, and maybe say, oh, I need a little bit more texture in this thing because, you know, I don't have as much here, or, you know, you sort of end up, again, just sort of thinking your way through it. But again, not a good idea to do too much here because it takes a while to figure out how much is, you know, actually in the background, and, you know, what it's going to look like, and whether we need more here or more there. Yeah, but that's basically it. So lots of patience required here. Lots of going slow, lots of just chilling out, drawing, and mostly we're thinking about, again, this idea of suggestion, which with line and color is at the line phase is mostly about patterns. Differentiating the materials with different sort of shapes and patterns and little sort of marks, so that even on a line basis, they sort of feel different. You know, we've got much more distinct things at the foreground here. If you sort of look at the parallax of the foreground, we've got these sort of distinct shapes that, you know, very clearly represent some type of plant. We've got a bit of sort of stuff here that feels, again, less distinct. So maybe this is sort of moss. As we go into the distance, again, we've got the same sort of stuff, but it's getting less distinct. It's getting more iconic, more graphic, more pattern-based. And then we basically repeat that idea, but it gets smaller as it goes into the far foreground. And then as we move into the sort of first level of the background, essentially what we're doing is saying there's none of this pattern here. You know, that pattern's gone, and instead we've got this sort of, you know, overlapping, you know, sort of piles of stuff. And so the idea is, you know, if you were to sort of zoom in and say, like, what is this? Again, that is kind of this, right? So it's that pattern, but just sort of distilled. And so the idea is we're sort of drawing, right? We're sort of drawing this line, right? This kind of overlap, but that's sort of happening there. And yeah, same sort of brush size. I'm not, you know, doing darker lines or stronger lines in the foreground. It's just about thinking about the iconography of it and the pattern of it. But yeah, I think that's all we've got time for today. We have hit the 3 o'clock mark. We've been going for 2 hours. And look, we've done a little bit. But that's just how this goes. You know, I think last week we were sort of saying, it might be sort of like 4 hours. Yeah, I mean, I think it's going to be that sort of 4 or 5 hours of, you know, just sort of chugging along and breaking it up. Yeah, I mean, I don't have time to work on this full time, you know, at all. I'm just sort of chipping away at it. I've got way too much other stuff going on to hit it hard. So I think what we'll do is I'll keep chipping away at this side of it. And maybe I'll organize maybe not next week, but maybe the week after, we might do like a final stream. Again, just once I've sort of got all the color stuff sort of sorted, and then we'll kind of just look at the image, maybe do some sort of Q&A and sort of see how all these sort of elements, you know, come together. Because I think this phase of it is just, it's just a little bit sort of mundane for a stream. Do you know what I mean? To sort of go through that, because, typically the issue with a line and color illustration is it's very challenging to, even show it to art directors and people at this phase, because you don't really get a feel for what's happening. So if you are trying to work in a similar style, one of the things you do is kind of, again, you're sitting there kind of thinking about these patterns, but you're also imagining how they're going to look with a particular color behind them, right? And where they sit in the hierarchy of detail, and sort of what effect and what texture you're trying to create by sort of, creating this. Because if we just got flat color plus the texture of the line, that's what we got to consider. But yeah, it can be very challenging if you're at this phase, because if you haven't done this before, you'll sort of get to this phase and you'll start to freak out, because the more lines you put on, the busier it's going to get. Like at the moment, we've still got foreground, background separation. So we haven't put lines in the background. As soon as we sort of work out the lines for all of this, it's going to flatten it all out even more. And so you have to have faith that, again, the coloring process is going to carry you there, right? It's all going to sort of work in the end. So anyway, that's sort of what we'll talk about maybe in a couple of weeks when we, figure out the color stuff. And I think, again, like Ray will broadcast, when we're sort of got that session next, probably either not next week, maybe the week after or something like that. We'll just do one final session. But yeah, thanks for hanging out. We will catch you around.